Bonjour and welcome to WT France, the weekly podcast in which we explain WTF happened in French politics in the last 7 days. I am your co-host Juliette.
And I am the other co-host, Pepijn, and I have a question this week. I have asked it before, but maybe there's a new answer now. So, Juliette, tell me, France, that country in the middle of Europe, does it have a new prime minister?
Yes, we do! Woohoo!
Woohoo! Wait. The podcast audience loves it. They're all sitting, they're a bit repetitive.
They're very repetitive. This sounds like a sitcom.
No, that's what we do with the other. So, a new prime minister, that is excellent. I did not hear anything about that all week.
Okay, I appreciate you playing along, but I think you have known for several days that we have a new prime minister.
Yeah, it's Macron himself, right?
Well, I mean, I feel like if he could have gotten away with it, he would.
He can. I looked it up. There's nothing in the constitution that blocks Macron to be the prime minister.
I think he probably would have gotten censored right away.
Oh, that bit, yeah.
Yeah, and that he hates losing.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've discovered that he really doesn't like losing. But no, it's not Macron. Michel Barnier is the new French prime minister.
And I know him. I think a lot of people know him. That's the weird thing. You all of a sudden you end up picking someone that everyone outside of France kind of has heard of.
Well, at least in Europe. I don't know if you're like in Asia or the US, if you've heard of Michel Barnier, but I think our European listeners definitely know him.
Europe and the UK, I think.
Yeah, definitely the UK.
Yeah.
So Michel Barnier, you know him, if you do, as an EU commissioner for many years, and the man who actually did a decent job representing the EU as chief negotiator during Brexit. He was quite good at making the Tories look stupid, though granted, that is not a very hard thing to do. And yeah, that is pretty much all of the nice stuff I have about him.
Oh, that is... Wait. Anyway,
yeah.
Does that mean we're getting to the good stuff now? Or is that the depressing stuff maybe?
Well, we're getting to the bad stuff about Michel Barnier. Gabriel Attal is out. He was the youngest prime minister of the Fifth Republic. Michel Barnier is in, and he is the oldest prime minister of the Fifth Republic. He is more than twice the age of his predecessor.
Wow.
He is so old that he was in Parliament in 1981, able to vote against the decriminalisation of homosexuality. He's that old that he thought homosexuality should be a crime like more than 40 years ago. He is super anti-immigration, and that's probably how he got the job in the end.
How come he's making it through when there is no new coalition?
Les Républicains, which is the party he's coming from, is quite small in the National Assembly. They got like less than 5% of the votes in the election. But they are halfway between the center and the extreme right. And so Macron looked there for a prime minister who wouldn't get censored by the extreme right. That's Barnier's trick. He is super anti-immigration, just enough to appeal to the extreme right.
That is... See, I knew that. I remember he wanted to have a moratorium on all immigration to Europe, with an exception, I think, of people from North America.
Yeah, I think something like that.
But all of that feels like a casual way to say either rich people only or maybe code for my type of people. And my type of people, I will not specify what I think he means with that. Whether he means it or not, he tried to use that to get votes, I guess.
Absolutely. I remember there was a poll a couple of weeks ago about, like, they polls the extreme right voters and ask what issues matter to you. And what came out top was immigration. And it just really felt code for, like, is it the racism? But we can't say, is it the racism? So we'll ask, is it the immigration?
So I think he also said something, he's okay with breaking European treaties that France is, that we are all a member of.
Yeah. So what he called it was a constitutional shield that would basically carve out exceptions to the constitutional obligation to respect treaties. Like in the French constitution, it's written in that France honors its international obligations. So it gives treaties like almost a constitutional status. And he's like, no, we'll carve out exceptions for that. So if anyone is expecting like a very pro-EU prime minister because of his role during Brexit, because he's been an EU commissioner, be ready to be disappointed.
Quick question. That's broader than just this, but you know this. When a country signs a treaty, by default, it's legally binding because they sign it.
Yeah.
Well, whatever people say, because often it's said like, well, it's not legally binding. We decide it's not legally binding. You see that a lot these days in politics, but it is, right?
It is. And like each country can have in their constitution their own way of saying like, this is how we ratify treaties. And then each country has a different approach. But yeah, if you ratify treaties, take an international obligation, it has to become legally binding. Otherwise, what is the point of them?
Yeah. Okay. So back to the, sadness. What are the next steps the new prime minister and maybe Macron will take?
So, first they have to make a government. A prime minister does not a government make. So I think that's the next few days is slowly going to start picking people. Some of them might be existing ministers, I expect. Then the next step is that he needs to do what we call a déclaration de politique générale, which is basically, here's what this government is going to do. And he does that to the National Assembly. And then there's probably going to be the first censor vote that he should pass if everything goes the way Macron expects.
So why do you think Macron thinks he won't be censored in that vote?
Because the Rassemblement National, the extreme right, basically gave him their blessing. And I think that's where I'm really angry. And I think I was wondering if this week we would have a podcast completely beeped out because I'd be swearing so much because of how angry I am.
Oh, sorry, that's not
That's not the right beep sound.
That's not the right beep sound.
I'll just have to try to stay polite.
Yeah, try to stay polite.
So we had 2 months ago an election in which voters from all parties almost sucked it up and voted for people that they don't necessarily like to make sure there wouldn't be an extreme right prime minister. And now we have a prime minister who has been basically selected by the extreme right. So I read an article this week that said, like, Macron kept calling Marine Le Pen to ask him what she thought of specific candidates. And she got to veto a bunch of them. We mentioned in the past episodes Xavier Bertrand, for instance, and she personally can't stand him. And so he did not become prime minister. That was basically because Marine Le Pen doesn't like him.
Neither do I, actually. But then again, I don't like Marine Le Pen either.
Probably for different reasons.
Yes.
She vetoed Cazeneuve, clearly too left-wing. She vetoed like some random other dude whose name was thrown to the journalist for 5 minutes at the start of the week. It was also what was very weird at the start of this week is like, it felt like every 12 hours, Macron would casually leak a new name to the journalist as like a sense check. Like, what about this guy? What about that guy? And by the way, there were guys every single time. Like at no point did Macron leak the name of a woman. Just noting this casually. And so, yeah, like Marine Le Pen just got to veto everyone until Macron came up with a name that she was like, oh, I guess this guy we won't reject outright.
So what I've seen is that even now, Marine Le Pen says she will only decide whether to support him after the first debate.
Yeah, that's correct.
From what you just described, that's clearly made up. Because she basically got her prime minister without actually, I guess, if it goes wrong, having to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's an awful bit of democracying all around.
Yeah. What drives me crazy, amongst other things, many things drive me crazy this week, is that Macron could actually have prevented this. He could have told his people in the parliament, like the deputies from his party, to not veto Lucie Castet. And he clearly told them to do that for Barnier, because Barnier is really far to the right. And there are some center-left people in Macron's party, not a lot of them, but they do exist. And he's making the deliberate choice to go for right-wing, nearing an extreme right, rather than suggesting a left-wing government. Yeah, That's his choice, completely.
So after he gets a government and gets a pass from the National Assembly, what will happen then? What is the third step in this?
So Barnier, or whoever is his economy minister, now has to make a budget.
Oh, fun.
That is going to be so hard, and it became obvious this week. It's going to be really, really hard, much harder than anyone thought. So we mentioned last week, like, there seems to be a big hole in public finances. And Bruno Le Maire, who's former economy minister now, as of 3 days ago, has announced that the state of the French finances is dire, like really bad. There's a lot of money missing. And he puts the blame on local communities for overspending, cities, departments, and regions.
Okay, so to recap here, the former economy minister puts the blame on someone else.
Yes.
So, but did they? Is the blame... Is it fair to say the local communities were overspending?
Maybe yes and no. So clearly they disagree, the local communities, and actually Bruno Le Maire pissed off a lot of people with that announcement on all parts of the political spectrum, because local communities have government people from all sides. So first, there's only so much debt that local communities can take on, like constitutionally. They are not allowed to go into debt to finance regular business. So like, paying local employees, for instance, that is not something they can take on debt. Only investments. And here investments can be a lot of things. It could be building a new school or a new high school. It could be, a lot of very different things. So there could still be like a lot of money. Second, they have a legal duty to balance their budgets. And the national budget doesn't have to do that. Like, there's no legal obligation. No one is watching except, I guess, for the EU. But what is happening is that we are on the end of a cycle for a lot of municipalities, because you can imagine, like, everyone gets elected at the same moment. So they had a program, they get elected. Now they start making plans, they start hiring people, they start contracting things out, they do like requests for proposals, and then the money starts being spent. And so everyone starts spending a lot of money at the same time. And so that's why it feels like, okay, suddenly everyone is spending a lot, but this is a completely predictable cycle that happens with every cycle of municipalities.
It's the 4-year cycle. Is it a 4-year cycle for elections or 5 in France?
For local elections, I'm not sure anymore. I think it's 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's completely predictable.
So how long has this Bruno guy been the economy minister? Because maybe, like, if he's only been that for 2 years, fair enough. Did he inherit a bad situation?
No, he didn't. This is his situation. He's been there for 7 years. This is how long he's done the job. He has no excuse. And really, I think what happened is that year after year, the national government has made budgets with extremely inflated expectations of income, because they have inflated expectations of GDP growth. And so they're like, oh, well, people are going to have more money, so there'll be more taxes, and that's how we'll pay for our stuff. And every time we've had less growth than they expected. And so now it's just adding up to a significant hole in finances.
But the good thing now is we get this right-wing government with a right-wing politician, and they're really good at being fiscally conservative, they say. So it's going to be fixed at least now.
Dear listeners,
no more cycle lanes for everyone.
Listeners, Pepijn sounds serious here, but he looks like he's going to puke at his own words a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
I mean, like, right-wing politicians got us into this mess. Again, 7 years that he's been in charge. And Le Maire is in Macron's party now, but he started in Les Républicains. He's definitely from the right side of the political spectrum. And again, this situation isn't coming from spending like crazy. It's coming from not having enough income. It's because they're not getting enough money from taxes through those inflating GDP growth figures, but also like removing the wealth tax, for instance. Like, that was removed in the last few years. Anyway, I don't expect whoever Barnier chooses to replace Le Maire to have much of a different policy. Actually, he might just keep Le Maire for what we expect.
It seems practical in a way. So what are the reactions on all of this in France?
So since Barnier was named, obviously there is massive disappointment on the left. There's actually going to be demonstrations today, probably as we speak. I'm not there because we live in the middle of Denmark. I probably would be there if if we were closer to a big center. The Rassemblement National, as you mentioned, they are really nicely keeping their hands clean out of this. They are getting someone who's going to do the exact policies they would have put in place without getting any of the negative political consequences. So this is a massive win. The centrists are divided. The center still does have some center-left people who are unhappy, but they are keeping somewhat quiet for now. Like there'll be like someone, like an unnamed source in a newspaper who says like, oh, well, we're very disappointed, but then they don't actually do anything about it. So, yeah.
Does France have a culture of gossip in a way leaking out from politics?
Oh, yeah. It's very, like a lot of national politics, especially things out of the National Assembly, tend to be gossip-based. And yeah, Gabriel Attal can be a full-time deputy now, and I think he's going to be much happier for it. And we are going to see a lot of him, I expect. He's now the head of his political group in the National Assembly. And then finally, it is a massive win for Les Républicains, who somehow got the prime minister job, even though the election was a disaster for them.
So, I assume that's all for French politics this week? Or hope, maybe?
Well, the prime minister circus really has overtaken everything. I hope we can start getting into actually getting stuff done from now on. There's one other story, a very sad one that I want to bring up that happened this week that was not part of the political football game, but I think matters a lot. There were 12 people this week who drowned while crossing the channel or attempting to from France to the UK. And it was a very shocking story, and it's becoming way too familiar. We're also getting familiar and used to, in a way we shouldn't, with people drowning in the Mediterranean. But what happened is the rescue operations in the channel are massively understaffed. There's not enough people, there's not enough boats. So when the notice came that there was a group of people attempting to cross the channel drowning, they couldn't react fast enough. And in fact, several of the bodies were picked up by fishermen who were able to react faster than the official rescue boats. I read an article, they interviewed one of the fishermen who picked up the bodies. He was in tears. He was completely devastated. This is a really, really hard thing that's happening. And having Barnier, who is so anti-immigration and also has a lot of not great history with the Brits, he's now in charge, and I worry nothing is going to improve and people are going to keep on dying. Sorry for being such a bummer, but I think
don't say sorry.
It's worth talking about those things.
I agree. I think this is politics. These are choices that are made, right?
It is political, yeah.
Absolutely. And the new situation will not make this better. That's a political choice. Yeah. Okay, this is a weird shift here, but last week you said you wanted to try to finish each episode on a high note. Is this at all possible after this week?
Yeah, I think so. Like, we have some happy news. The Paralympics have been going really well as an event in general. It's well organized, people are having fun, and it's going well for France, the French delegation. Loads of medals, way more than ever, sort of like the Olympics. Being the home country probably helps for results. But another thing that I noticed is that the coverage has been really high quality. I think there's a tendency when you talk about disabled people to go in the sob stories and this is so sad and they had a difficult childhood or a horrible accident. But instead, the coverage has really been focused on here are the amazing performance they've been doing. There's been a story I really, really liked. It's the story of an Iranian volleyball player. So volleyball at the Paralympics is like everyone is seated and they're obviously it's volleyball, so they're opposite side of the net. But that player happens to be the second tallest person in the world. He's nearly 2.5 meters tall. And that has allowed him to lead his team to win Paralympic gold because he's just kind of even seated. He's just towering over everyone. Like he's probably taller than you, even while sitting down. And so he's like the other teams that have had the misfortune to play against him, they call him the lethal weapon. Like we cannot possibly win against this guy. So I thought it was such a fun story. You should look him up. His name is Morteza Merad. And he looks like just such a nice dude in general as well.
I had not heard of him, actually. He sounds really cool. So I'll look into this. I probably end up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I've watched some of the Olympics, but I haven't watched the team sports. A lot of the individual sports, they're really fun to watch.
They really are.
And as you say, the reporting is really good.
Yeah.
I have also a bit of positive news this week, actually.
Okay, tell us.
It is more personal. You already know about it, but the listeners don't. But it makes me happy, so I want to share. We got a new rooster. So we have chicken, which the listeners probably don't know.
2 hens.
We have 2 hens. And now we have a hen friend. He's a bit young compared to the hens. But he seems to be having fun. We got him this morning. If anything exciting happens with him, we'll report at the end of this podcast.
His name is Poofy. He was named by his previous people.
Yeah, Poofy. Yeah. He would probably make for a pretty good prime minister of France.
And this is very on topic for French politics because the national animal of France is a rooster.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Totally relevant to a politics podcast.
Poofy the rooster is the new French national emblem. You heard about it here first.
Yeah. We should probably round up now.
All right. That's a wrap for this week. À la semaine prochaine.
Bye.